Thoughts on Apple's quarterly earnings call. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by Text Expander by Smile, the makers of world-class software. Visit textexpander.com/podcast to learn more and download your free demo. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's Tuesday night. That means it's MacVoices Live. We are live on YouTube at MacVoices TV on YouTube. We'd love to have you join us there. Come on in to the chat, throw your comments, questions, thoughts at us, and we will respond like a bunch of trained seals or something like that.
You're going to say monkeys.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from. Sorry, that just came right off the top of my head. So tonight we are just a few hours after Apple announced its quarterly financial results, and that's going to be our primary topic. And I want to go around the room, introduce you to everyone who's here and who is going to share their wisdom. So taking my screen like I always do, first up, Mr. Jay Miller is back. Jay, good to have you.
I mean, seals are pretty dumb animals. I'm just saying, like, yeah, they can balance a ball on their nose, but other than, that's right, this is this podcast, isn't it? Hey, how's it going, Chuck?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Frank Petrie is here, and he did not get a haircut. Frank, good to see you.
Well, thank you. It's pleasant to be somewhere.
Yep. Okay. David Ginsburg is here from the Chicago area. David, is it warm out there as it is here in central Pennsylvania?
It is. How are you, Chuck? And yes, it's been mid-90s all the last few days, and I've been happy sitting in the air conditioning, staying cool.
A lot to be said for an office job at times. Yeah.
Yes.
Mike Schmitz has joined us. Mike, it's been a while since you've been here. Good to have you.
It's true. The stars aligned, so I figured I better show up, even if the financial stuff is not exactly my wheelhouse. It's good to hang out with everybody again.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you have some thoughts on it, so that makes sense. Jim Ray is here as well. Jim, welcome.
I remember haircuts.
I don't.
From the olden times, the before times.
Okay. Does this mean you don't get them or don't need them?
No,
he's always wearing hats.
That's why I don't. My wife's been cutting my hair, but I haven't been to a haircut place. Okay. In fact, I noticed the haircut place I go is not there anymore.
Well, if you weren't going, maybe that's what put them out of business.
I think everyone wasn't going.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. Last but absolutely not least, and with a background that is indicative of our first topic, Mr. Mark Fuccio. Mark, good to have you back.
Hi, Chuck. Thanks for the invitation. And I have no hair appointment scheduled for Tuesday, 11 a.m. a week from today. So we can close the loop on that discussion.
I'm sure your barber appreciates the support.
Yes.
So Apple made a boatload of money again. And it's just amazing. This is another record quarter. They beat the estimates. Yeah. Mark is yawning because he's bored.
Just half the people left the chat room.
Yeah, well, but there's something here that I want to I'm stealing from 9 to 5 Mac. But the categories, iPhone up 49.7% year over year. Mac up 16.38% year over year. iPad up 12% year over year. Wearables, home, and accessories up 36.12% year over year. And services up 32.9% year over year. I mean, that's kind of amazing, I think. Even if last year was a pandemic year, these are quarterly results. And that's just staggering. And I didn't even talk about the B numbers, the billion numbers that go along with those. I was as impressed with the percentages as anything. Anybody feel the same way about that?
So I haven't looked. Did the stock go down?
Oh yeah,
yes it did.
It's tradition.
Of course.
Yes.
Does the sun come up in the morning?
The most interesting thing to me as a Mac nerd is that the last 4 quarters have been the highest quarters for the Mac ever, which I think even a year ago, people were questioning whether Apple was even committed to the Mac anymore because iPhone was the thing that was making all the money. Services were the thing that were making all the money.
Yeah.
And Tim Cook even called out that the reason that was because of the M1, the transition
M1.
to the M1 chips. And I feel like if there was going to be a transition period where you wouldn't really see the effect of those new chips yet, we would still be in it with this
Right.
like version 1 M1. But I think it's what we're seeing from the results there, where they are obviously making a ton of money from the Macs because they're saving the money having to outsource the chips. But we're about to see a really big increase in the performance as well. I think it's a very exciting time to be a Mac user.
The other thing, though, Mike, that I think I agree with you about the transition. And what strikes me as really interesting about that is that really the iMac finally just got an M1. I mean, other than that, it's been the low-end laptops and the Mini, which everybody can kind of debate what category that fits in, but it hasn't been the big iMacs or the MacBook Pros. So I would agree with you that you would think that would almost be a tentative part of the transition, and yet they're flying out the door like hotcakes.
So very small
air.
anecdotal evidence here, but I bought a decked out 16-inch MacBook Pro in February of 2020. Maxed out the RAM, maxed out the hard drive, maxed out the processor, and replaced it in December of 2020 with an M1 Mac Mini for about $600.
Yeah.
This thing runs circles around my decked out MacBook Pro, which kind of boggles my mind even to think about it. So I agree, like we're just seeing the entry level stuff, the performance level stuff, and like the 16-inch MacBook Pro replacement. That's really where we're going to see a lot of a big performance jump. But even with this low end one, it's so much faster. It's ridiculous.
I have a friend that has the same machine. He's a video editor, and 2 years ago he bought this, and he's phenomenal in using Premiere. He doesn't know what to do, and I keep telling him, I said, dude, you spent all that money now. Someone down the road is going to say, hey, $3,000 for something that runs like that may not be bad.
Another interesting thing is, the average price of the machines is probably a lot lower than it was 2 years ago. Apple doesn't release quantities, only numbers. So the revenue number is way up, even though the price of the machine, look, Mike is saying I replaced, what your 16-inch was probably close to $3-4 grand, and you replaced it with a $600 computer. Yeah. And yet Apple's revenue is significantly up. So the numbers of units must just be incredible. And I think the iMac probably only showed up for maybe the last 2 weeks of this quarter.
Yeah.
Probably
about right.
There was, quarter 2 was 70% increase over year over year, but then this quarter was only 16% year over year. So, there obviously was a big peak when them ones came out in the second quarter, and, kind of leveled out this quarter as far as the year over year.
Well, now everybody's looking forward to the next iteration and the iteration beyond that, the larger iMac, what's the MacBook Pro 16 or whatever size it ends up being.
But wasn't the year ago quarter big because of the pandemic? Isn't this 16% over a year ago quarter that was also a record?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, because I think some of these quarter to quarter comparisons are a little maybe misleading because
well, no, I'm talking about year ago quarter.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, quarter. Sorry, I meant to say quarter to quarter. Which is year. Which is by default, sort of a standard 1 year time period. If it's quarter to the immediate preceding quarter, people refer to that as sequential quarter. So everybody's correct so far in their use of their language. But certainly, last year in the June quarter, Apple really, had a huge result for both Macs and iPads. And the fact that is only 16% this year, that's really very well, especially since there's a little bit of noise out there that they're saying that for the June quarter that the PC unit growth is going to be up around 10 or 11%. So, if that's true, Apple is handily beating the overall market growth. And I think part of the reason is I think they're stealing share away from a lot of Windows people. I know this past quarter, a cousin of mine who has long had an iPhone, who's long had an iPad, finally got tired of her Windows machine breaking and asked me what to do. And I told her buy a MacBook Air, and she did. And she's amazed at how light it is and how fast it is.
I've seen a lot of people say using Microsoft 365 on iPad is a valid experience.
It is.
Sure. I mean, depending on what level you're using it at and what hardware you're using it with. Are you using a keyboard with it and a mouse, or?
Well, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but then we're into the question of, what are you doing with it? So I want to make sure I welcome the chat room and catch up with some of their comments. So guys, welcome. Good to have you all. So Webb pointed out that Apple stock was down 222 and closed at 146.77. Be really interesting to see what happens tomorrow morning.
Bye.
Yeah. And Paul brought up that this is because of government free money that put the icing on the cake for Apple, which, I don't know, Frank. I mean, or Paul, excuse me. I don't know. That would
that'd lighten your finger on the trigger. But I still don't think it'll get you to pull it.
There may be some extent of truth to that, but it's hard to know. Yeah. Well, actually, it's knowable if you want to spend tens of thousands of dollars, to go out and do some research. But I don't know that it's worth spending that money to figure out the answer to that question.
I buy an iMac first.
If there's any stimulus influence, in my opinion on this, we're at the end of a school year where, for the first time ever, a bunch of parents were like, oh crap, my kid is in the living room with like the rinkiest, like the dinkiest of machines, because that's all we had available. We've got a little bit of extra money. We might be going back into this online class thing, or people might be doing hybrid college for the first time.
Right.
Let's try to be a little bit more prepared this time. Maybe we help, Cindy or whoever, with a cool graduation present of a MacBook Air. I don't think people were just like free money, buy iPads. Like, I don't think that's anybody's intent, at least not anybody that I know that was, really relying on that, especially when, it's interesting how Apple's earnings went up, but we still have, if you look at the landscape of employment, especially in the US, it's like, there's a lot of questions that have to be asked about that. So I don't know if I can correlate the two of, free government cheese to iPads for everyone.
Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Smile, the makers of Text Expander for Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Text Expander is the best way to get more productive with your Mac. A few keystrokes can correctly enter your phone number, your address, a paragraph of text, or a page of code into whatever you're working on. And it does it the first time and every time correctly and in a flash. That means no more fat-fingering information that you know so well. You do that by setting up what Text Expander calls snippets. You set the content of the snippet, you decide what keystrokes or phrase you will use to trigger your snippet, and you're done. Your snippet is now ready to use. If you're a one-person operation, that can be an incredible time saver. But if you're in business, Text Expander's value jumps exponentially. Now, when a team member uses your snippet, not only do you get accuracy, but also consistency for whatever your snippet is about. A service call response, a tech support answer, Text Expander makes sure that what you once said is what is said. Find out how Text Expander can make a difference for you and for your business at textexpander.com/podcast. Click the link now and you can be starting to tap the power of Text Expander in just a few minutes. textexpander.com/podcast. Check it out. Thanks to Smile, the makers of Text Expander, for their support of MacVoices.
Well, it's doomed.
But anyway, Chuck, did the person have a follow-on question? I think people jumped on you right away, and it sounds like there was more of a question or comment coming.
No, he just said he doesn't lie. So since when, Paul? But I think Jay brings up a really interesting point, because there is definitely something going on in the U.S. employment market. And I can't speak for around the world, but I know I've seen it and talked to a lot of people across the country, and the same things from Massachusetts to California. People are reassessing their employment and the way that they are employed and how they're employed, what they're doing and where they're doing it. Part of me can't help but wonder if some of this isn't being, some of what we're seeing with Apple and maybe with PCs might not be driven by people preparing this to change their employment or adapt to a new hybrid model or working from home because they can't do it with what they've had up to this point.
You know who's not preparing for that? Apple. They're not letting anybody work from home.
Well, not so far, But Jay, to be fair, though, what they proposed was a hybrid model. I mean, they're saying they want people back in the office, but they also were giving them options to work. What was it, 2 or 3 days a week from home? 3. Okay, so that is going to be an interesting part of it.
Well, if you moved to Utah in the past year, then that's probably not going to work for you.
Yeah, it's funny. I know a couple high-tech execs who work at large companies here in the Bay Area, and they've one's moved to Hawaii and one's moved to Southern California, and just haven't told their employers. They're just doing it. So
yeah, I know that there are people at Apple that have done
reckoning.
Yeah, but Mark, I mean, we're a little bit off topic, but as it relates to the technology to support this, it may be something that people are going to start to demand. I know in at least one industry that I'm involved with, trying to find good people, experienced people, qualified people is difficult. Yeah. And, by going to a virtual or hybrid model, and especially a virtual model, all of a sudden now I don't have to hire within 50 miles of my office. I can hire from Canada. I can hire from Mexico. I can hire anywhere as long as the time zones line up.
So we've talked about that before, that you have no more travel costs. You don't have hotel costs. You don't have per diem and all that stuff. Right. You can cut that back, even if you go to a 3-day thing. If you can save 30% off of that, you're doing well.
Yeah, right. Again, but the 3-day thing still means that you have to live within driving distance of the building.
True. Right. But I mean, if you're going to have a meeting with some other corporation that you're maybe in the hoots of either working with or trying to obtain, you don't have to go out there.
But I guess there's two tracks to this conversation. One is that Jay said, and Jim's just underscoring, is the Apple specific commute policy, and then there's the other one that Chuck opened up of overall will companies be requiring it. So we should be careful on which track we're addressing our comments to.
And to bring this back around, I mean, this shift in the landscape, I mean, we were having a great conversation before we started recording. Chuck and David and I were talking about the administrative infrastructure for the Mac ecosystem of, things like Jamf now being a thing and being able to, do more. I've been out of the IT space for 6 years now. So for me, I'm used to you have this giant, firewall and intrusion detection system that's running. And then basically you have spyware on each of your, employees' machines that tattle on you every time you do something bad on your little Windows machine. Now, a lot of people are saying, hey, not only do I want to work from home, I want to use the tools that I'm most comfortable with at home, which means we need to invest in Macs. We need to make sure that if we do have Macs, we own the company owns the machine, so the company can install their software on it, which means a lot of MacBooks get bought, bringing those record sales in. And right now, when you can get away with buying, your employee an $800 MacBook Air, sure. So if I'm a company owner and it's like either $5,000 per, in device, or, $1,500 once you do the whole business license and stuff, I'm going to go $1,500 every time.
Well, hasn't the let employees choose Macs been kind of a growing thing for like 5 years at least? Or
Yeah,
I think in some
I don't think
industries,
it's this
but not
rapid a
all.
rate.
Yeah, not at every, but I mean, a growing thing is what it is. Certainly not everywhere,
Yeah.
but that predated the pandemic, I think.
I think it's opened up to more companies now because of the pandemic. Like they didn't have much of a choice because they didn't have the infrastructure in place anyway.
Okay,
So
so
this
companies
whole
like
BYOD thing.
Go ahead, David.
I said companies like IBM, companies like SAP, companies like Walmart, companies like Starbucks. I saw all this when I went to the Jamp User Conference years ago and talked to a lot of the people from these companies, and that's what they've done. IBM created a IBM at Work, Mac at Work tool. All the new brand new hire has to do is turn on the computer and boot it up. It's going to use your sign in they give you, and then you sign in, everything installs. You don't even have to think about it. They've made the user experience so much easier, and they wrote their own tool and worked with Jamp in the process. And now IBM's got something like 150,000 Macs in their environment. I mean, who'd have thought a company like IBM to have Macs and then that many of them?
Right,
Cisco's the same way.
Right, and famously, IBM has documented, their cost savings on IT
ROI
support and their ratio of number of IT people for Windows versus Macs, and overall, it's a huge cost savings. And for a company that's struggling to grow, that relies on cost cutting and efficiency to produce earnings, that's very important, and that characterizes IBM.
Yep. I mean,
I want to bring the chat room back into this too. Paul says he can see some of this in his business. Webb says he's dealing with the same back to the office question in his business as well. And Webb also said, and this is interesting, especially probably to David and me, that their cyber insurance has gone up significantly due to the work from home model and the additional vulnerability.
Yeah.
Which, that opens up a lot of questions about, just how prepared are a lot of these companies for this, and what will they have to do to get prepared as this develops, because it's going to develop.
Regardless of the platform you have, I mean, even when someone's working from home, we have to be very, you have to be very restrictive of, okay, does this person get a printer or not? Okay, so printing documents, you're opening up cyber risk right there. I mean, any proprietary information, we don't have any, the companies don't have any control of this at all. So that's that you have that problem. And then as far as the IT part of the support, it's already a challenge as it is to do it remotely, because whenever I work on a computer, if the computer has complete failure, then you have two options. You meet me at the office or you ship it to me. So you still have that same problem when it comes to that. But going back to the cyber issue, that's really where a lot of companies are just very, very worried that they could potentially have some losses because of that.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to something Jim said. Jim, I think there was the option to choose Mac or PC, but the other thing that was happening and was huge was and is bring your own device. So, that I can work on my laptop, not the company's, but mine. Right. So we have security issues. I think that was
starting before the pandemic, but the pandemic has probably accelerated it.
Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line, all this is that the Apple earnings report is really a yawner, another record.
Yeah.
Well, sort of.
Nothing to say. Move along.
I did find it interesting. You guys are sharing stories of like the IBM 150,000 machines, and Apple specifically called out a couple of those, like the Italian gas company, where they were trying to paint a picture of like, hey, look, you could do this with your company too, because there's these other big companies doing it. And I thought that was kind of strange, because I don't see how that scales to make any sort of meaningful impact. Going back to Jay's story, like you maybe know somebody who buys a nice graduation gift because they need something. What they've been using is so old they have to upgrade it. But it seems like such a very small data point when you look at the numbers that Apple is dealing with.
Well, and we've been talking a lot about IBM and these big companies. My wife works for a company of 10 people, and for them, they've been providing their own devices and everything like that. So when you have, 20, 30 extra new small businesses opening up in every city, per month, and each of those small businesses, well, they need some type of device, and they've been, working for the man, for so long now. It's like, I'm going to get my own device. I'm going to get my PPP loan and buy myself a Mac Mini and be off to the races. I'm going to use the devices that I want in my own little small business. And I mean, again, when, someone mentioned, all of the security implications of this, we're still in the world where the perceived notion is that if I'm operating on an Apple device, my device is inherently safer. So when someone says, I don't want to take a lot of risks, I got money to spend, let me spend it, they're probably going to go with the easy to manage small business choice, which right now Apple's winning.
Yep.
And go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say, let's bring this back to something on today's call, which is, at the end they were asking about guidance, and both Tim and Luca indicated that they expect, or maybe it was just Luca, that they're expecting strong double-digit growth through the rest of the year. So I don't know how many times I heard the word double-digit growth. They need a verbal text expander snippet for it because it came up so many times. But that again, that's to me, that's signs that this is a wave with a lot of water and depth behind it. It's not just a short-term thing driven by the pandemic. So. It's really interesting that, they haven't been given guidance since the pandemic struck, I guess, in March quarter last year. But the fact that they're confidently making statements about continuing to see strong growth around the world, and at the same time saying, and it's, it can be restricted due to component shortages, which is another sign that there's huge demand out there that they may not be able to fulfill, leading into, good setup for revenue in the following quarter. So I think overall it's a very, very, positive. Sorry, I may have muted myself at the end there. Just to summarize, overall, they had a great quarter, and, sort of their body language, if you want to generalize that to just sort of the language they were saying, they seem positive about what's coming up for the next 2 quarters ahead.
As you can tell, our discussion of Apple's quarterly earnings results took us down some interesting side discussions and maybe a little bit broader perspective on a variety of things that Apple's involved in. And that continues in the next edition of MacVoices. And I hope you'll join us then, because I think you will find some of the observations very, very interesting. So until the next time, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.